Case,
Hmm?
what are your thoughts on The Empire Strikes Back?
On The Empire Strikes Back, it is one of the best films of all time, and it is easily the best of the original and prequel Star Wars films. I would say it's probably my favorite of all the Star Wars films. It's a perfectly functional movie without any of the rest of the stuff. It has the most interesting parts of all the other Star Wars movies. And unlike every other middle book or middle movie, it is actually very memorable on its own, you know?
So it's a very good continuation of the story, but it also can stand alone by itself, unlike, say, the second Pirates movie.
Well, every Pirates movie after the first Pirates movie is its own special thing.
Special?
Listen, the first Pirates movie is a genuine cinematic masterpiece, and the other Pirates movies are cannon fodder popcorn flicks. Literally. I do love them. In fact, I think my second favorite Pirates movie, because Karina actually talked about this recently, is the second Pirates movie. There's no plot really at all, but there are several very good sword fights, and that makes up for it, in my opinion. But my favorite Pirates movie besides the first one is the fifth one. And it's only because Jeffrey Rush seems to be having the time of his life. I would just watch Jeffrey Rush play Captain Barbossa pretty much in any circumstance. I like him better than Jack Sparrow. There, I said it. Barbossa's better than Jack Sparrow.
Might I make a terrible confession? I have seen 1 through 4. I still have not seen the fifth one.
That's fine. It's not a good movie. It's just my favorite of the sequels.
Welcome to This Is Lit, a podcast where we drink and talk about our favorite books. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey.
So raise a glass and let's get started.
All right, Liz, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking Coke and bourbon.
I'm drinking Coke and rum.
Woo, cheers!
Just hard liquor mixed with soda. It's like I love to make a cocktail, and I actually have stuff in the house to make hurricanes, but I just do not have the energy, and I don't have any wine right now because I had to stop at Target because of the tornado, and the Target was in Kansas, which means they don't sell wine. So I have no wine in the house.
Yeah, y'all, we both survived a tornado today. Welcome to the Midwest.
It's tornado season, baby. But today we are continuing the Truly Devious series with The Vanishing Stair, which is the second book in the series. As of right now, as we said in the last episode, there are only 3 out, but there is a 4th one expected to come out later this year. Liz has read the first 2, right? And I have now read the first 2, but this is her second read of the first 2. But when we get to the 3rd one, we're both going to be in the dark. So that'll be exciting. But in the meantime, we have to do the middle book.
Yes, the second in the series, as Case said already. So it is continuing the story of Miss Stevie Bell at Ellingham Academy, trying to solve an 80-year-old kidnapping and murder most foul.
So if you remember, which you should, because the last episode went up just last month. It's the most recent. Usually we try to space out our serials. But in this case, it's really compelling and I wanted to read more. And I also knew I would not be able to maintain the story in my head, and the books were accessible at the library, lots of different reasons, but we're going to just do the first 3 Truly Devious back to back. So you probably already remember a lot of this stuff.
Yes, and also with Maureen Johnson, those series of books we normally tend to do close together because we get so excited about them.
Yeah, it goes back to her like pacing abilities, and like
yes,
you don't realize how invested you are until you get to the end, and then you're just ready to pick up the next one. I actually resisted the urge today. Today I was in the car for the first time in a long time, and I have Hand on the Wall already downloaded on my phone, but I did not listen to it in the car because I was afraid that I would get mixed up plot points from this one and Hand on the Wall. But what I'm discovering, even without having read Hand on the Wall, I have to admit, Vanishing Stare on its own did not leave a huge impression on me.
Vanishing Stare is very much a middle book. Mm-hmm. It has essential information you need for the story to continue and for the plot to move forward. You do get a few answers, but not as many as you would like. It's very much a... I read them both originally back to back because I told you I originally buddy read the first one with Allison from Story Eye Reviews. We also buddy read The Vanishing Stare because we read it with our book club when it first came out, which was January 22nd of 2019, a year before my children would be born. That's how I remember the date.
There you go.
So it is unremarkable in and of itself, just by itself. This book would not make any sense without the first Truly Devious novel. And I think that's probably going to be the case with Hand on the Wall as well. Truly Devious and The Vanishing Stare do not feel like two separate books to me. They feel like one story. Yeah. And it's just too many pages for the publishers to put in one book.
That's definitely the vibe I got as well, because it is a YA novel, and there are some stipulations that most publishers have on like how many words they want in a YA novel. So I did kind of wonder if these two hadn't originally been a single book, especially considering that Hand on the Wall is not the final book, but the fourth book is. And usually you see trilogies, not 4-book series. So I'm kind of wondering if that, like, I think I agree with you that that's probably what happened. But as a result, not a lot happens in The Vanishing Stare until like the back half of the book. You get the back half of the book is loaded with activity, but the front half of the book is basically just like setting the stage and also recapping what happened in the first book, which is not necessarily bad, but it definitely is not something you can sit down and read as a standalone novel.
No. And most sequels are very difficult to understand as a standalone novel. Unless it's one of those series where there's 20 or so books, like the one that comes to mind is Jim Butcher, the Dresden Files.
Or any of the Terry Pratchett Discworld stuff.
Yes, or Discworld. Or the Mistborn series even.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely cases in which middle novels in a trilogy or a series can work on their own, but I feel like in this case, it's very much just a necessity that Vanishing Stare is not as action-packed as the one before.
Yes, and the genre we are in, with this being the continuation, this whole series being a continuation of one long story, it makes sense that it wouldn't be a standalone novel.
Yes. But it does take place, that does make it easier for us in terms of our kind of outline that we have for discussion, because it takes place in mostly the same places at Ellingham Academy and the town nearby, Burlington.
Yes.
And it also takes place with mostly the same characters. We will have a couple more introduced here, but it does follow Stevie in her adventure to find Truly Devious along with her classmates. And a lot of the themes are the same. So that actually cuts a lot of our discussion down. So I guess we should start with kind of our plot summary here, because Stevie, after the end of Truly Devious, whenever she realized that David's father was Edward King, that's where the book ended. And when we pick up with her in this book, she is at a coffee shop in Philadelphia because her parents have dragged her ass home.
Yes, because there is a student who has died and a student who has been accused of their death who is now missing. That, as a concerned parent, it makes sense, but it also rightfully really irks Stevie a lot, because Stevie was like, I was making headway. Why did you do this? And also, too, there is kind of an underlying tone of Stevie's parents being very controlling and very much disregard what their daughter wants in order for her to conform to the societal and gender norms that they are accustomed to.
And well, they didn't want her to go in the first place. Like, even in the first book, even on the carriage ride up to the school, they were still kind of trying to talk her out of it. So while I do understand the impulse to pull your child out of a school where there has been a death, possibly a murder, and another student run away, like I can understand that impulse, but I also feel like they were kind of looking for any kind of excuse to pull her.
I agree. The controlling nature of Stevie's parents is very much revealed in the first 1 to 2 chapters of this book. It was alluded to in Truly Devious, and now it is really kind of expanded upon in The Vanishing Stare, which gives Stevie all the more reason to want to get away. Like, the reason she is in the coffee shop is because she doesn't want to be home.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about it expanding upon. I feel like the entirety of The Vanishing Stare is just expanding upon what we already learned in Truly Devious, which again, we kind of talked about how that makes it harder to discuss, but it does also give us a richer world for the reader's enjoyment and for the purposes of deepening the mystery. Because in an Agatha Christie, these two books would have been smashed together in one because they're for adults. But since it is the publishers kind of dictate the word counts you can have on YA novels, and they are split up, it definitely encourages the reader to continue to read the series because the stuff that happened in Truly Devious was so compelling.
Yes. In most mysteries, the world is confined. Even with this series, the world is still pretty confined, but this just seems to make this confined world even bigger.
Yeah,
because
I definitely agree with that.
We're seeing a couple more characters. We're seeing a little bit more of the town. And some of the action now is starting to happen outside of Ellingham Academy.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us back to Stevie in the coffee shop in Philadelphia. She has kept in contact with some of her friends from Ellingham, Nate and Janelle in particular, but it kind of bums her out to talk to him because, again, she wants to be there. And she's kind of thinking about this as she goes home, and she walks in her front door, and sitting on her parents' couch is Senator Edward King.
He is the gentleman that is not only David's father, but he is also, it is alluded to that he is extremely right-wing in his belief systems, a candidate who Stevie's parents have run campaigns for. So they worship this man. Let's say they possibly may have dipped him in gold and put him on display at a convention, kind of man.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because that was kind of the comparison that was going on in my brain during Truly Devious, was that Senator King was kind of a Donald Trumpian type character. But I actually really enjoyed The Vanishing Stair because I feel like it gave me a better understanding of the character. We actually see him, he talks to Stevie, and he has like character development within the story. And he's not really a Donald Trump type because he's infinitely more calculating. He definitely comes across to me more as like, let's see, who can I hatefully name drop here? Josh Hawley, or Marco Rubio. He definitely comes across as like an establishment Republican who utilizes xenophobia and fear to inflame people, but he definitely does it with much more deliberate precision than Donald Trump's kind of scattershot. Like he's definitely smarter than Donald Trump.
Well, that's not a high bar, my dear. He could possibly be similar to a candidate who abandoned his state to go to Cancun in the middle of a national emergency.
Yeah, I mean, except for Ted Cruz is also really, really stupid.
Yes.
But that's not what we're here to talk about. The point is, we all know, like, as soon as we meet Edward King, he comes across as and this characterization has been around for a long time. Like, it's not just beholden to modern day GOP. The yuppie, the kind of like smarmy politician that you see in like Wall Street or in like, different political biopics and stuff. It's that same sleazy energy that we've seen in those things before.
It's almost like he's some kind of political mafia boss.
Yeah, it definitely he pulls a lot of strings. He has a lot of connections, but he definitely doesn't do anything for free, and he always has his own motivations for things. It's a characteristic. It's a type of character archetype that we're very familiar with as readers and as film watchers. You see this character crop up everywhere, but it is especially prescient with the way that the GOP has kind of imploded on itself in the last 4 years.
Yes,
And I don't think that's a coincidence.
yes, it's very similar to how they operate or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
At the moment. Yes, yeah, so he convinces Stevie's parents to send her back to Ellingham, and his condition for her is that she keeps an eye on his son David, because he thinks David is soft on Stevie, and Stevie will be able to keep David in school and keep him from dropping out.
Yeah, David has gotten into a lot of trouble since Stevie left. He says some crazy stuff like, "Oh, my new religion is screaming at the sun every morning," so he wakes everybody up screaming at the sun at 5 a.m. He's sleeping in classes. He's like skipping out on classes to go bathe in the fountains. He's pulling pranks. He's doing everything he can to get expelled, but because his father is such a powerful and influential politician, the school he's going to have to do something really crazy for them to actually expel him, which is interesting because we know this, David knows this, Edward King knows this, but Stevie doesn't seem to realize this right off the bat, because she does agree that she'll go back and try to make David behave. But the thing is, even if David hadn't been behaving, it would have been a long time before he would have done something that would have gotten him kicked out of Ellingham. So yeah. I think that Edward King kind of uses Stevie's affection for David to make her think that she's doing something noble for, like, because she doesn't want to help Edward King with anything. She hates him. She doesn't like what he stands for, but she does care about David. And so I think that he is utilizing that against her just as much as he is against David.
Yes. And it's an it's an agreement, but it's kind of in a soft agreement where she's like, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. I'm not going to actively seek out David. If he wants to see me, he can come see me. And I don't need to tell his dad what's going on every single minute of every single day.
Yeah, she's not reporting to him or anything. It seems very innocuous on the surface. It's just like, go back to the school and David will probably behave himself. And he even says at one point, I'm not suggesting that you like start a relationship with him or anything. I'm just saying that if you're there and you're hanging out with him, that he will be more inclined to stay. So it sounds like a pretty easy deal. And she knows that no one else on the planet is going to be able to convince her parents to let her go back to Ellingham. So she takes him up on it, which I don't think is wrong. I think that was the right thing to do. But that becomes, sorry, go ahead.
It serves Stevie's interest to get her back to school, which is what she wants. And she agonizes over whether or not she should tell David. And she just kind of avoids him.
Yeah, the crux of David and Stevie's conflict throughout this entire book is the knowledge that Edward King is the one who sent her back to school with instructions to watch after David, and David does not know this.
Yes.
That is the whole crux of their conflict throughout the course of The Vanishing Stair, which is a little bit different than their conflict previously, just with like him being obnoxious and her not being sure if she's attracted to him or not. In this book, it's pretty definitively she's interested in David. She has romantic feelings towards David, but she's conflicted because she knows that Edward King has some dictation over what she does and says because of that.
Yes, and now she's like, it gives me an icky feeling and I can't quite place my finger on why.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like she kind of slowly comes to realize that it's like, because of this, I'm now in his pocket and I don't like that.
Yeah. So she does get to come back to school. She actually flies back on a private jet, and he goes with her. They kind of, they have some conversation on the plane. He's basically just a creep. And then she gets back to Ellingham. And a lot of the book from that point is kind of just dedicated to her getting back into the swing of things at school, her classes, her studying. And then the next big thing that happens is Dr. Scott gives her a new assignment.
Yes, she has an internship with Dr. Hunter, who has been working the Ellingham case for years.
She wrote what is considered the most famous book. Like Stevie says, everyone who ever gets into this true crime story starts with the book that Dr. Fenton has written. So Dr. Fenton is already established as an investigator and writer who has studied the Ellinghams, and she's looking to write another book about the Ellingham case.
Yes, and she's very nonchalant about the information she has and all of her studies she's done. She has very much kind of the characterization of like a vodka aunt.
She's a huge alcoholic too.
Yeah, her place is a mess. She's an alcoholic. She smokes. She's a lot. This woman is like hanging on by a very frayed thread.
Yeah, she's not well. And the only thing she really seems to care about is the Ellingham case. And so she and Stevie start working together on it. And Stevie also gets to meet her nephew, Hunter, who lives with her because she is a professor at the local university in Burlington. And he gets a tuition discount because she's his aunt. So he's living with her, going to the university, and keeping an eye on her for the rest of their family because she is not completely mentally stable.
No. They basically, it is alluded to that working this case has driven her to the brink.
Yeah.
So it could be kind of like a foreshadowing for Stevie. It's one of those that it's like, this case could become so all-consuming you just lose yourself to it. So it's kind of like she sees this woman who's written this book that she has admired and pored over and done all most of her research with, and this woman is not well. And yeah, it kind of serves as a bit of a warning.
Yeah. So, but Stevie is thrilled to have the project and be more involved. But the thing that she can't quite let go of is what happened to Ellie, because Ellie disappeared on the night that Stevie accused her.
Out of a locked room.
Out of a locked room. And she has not been seen since. She has some friends in Burlington, so people are like, well, maybe she went there, hooked up with them. She's lived in communes. She could be anywhere, but no one has seen her. She has vanished completely. And Stevie is like, she only had a coat. She didn't even have shoes. And you're going to tell me she's out in the Vermont mountains and she's fine? And so she's really troubled by this. And she kind of keeps dwelling on it. And so this prompts her to have a conversation with Larry, who has told her several times, you have to follow all the rules to the letter. You can't be sneaking into tunnels. You can't be investigating crimes that should be investigated by the cops. You need to keep your head down, do your work, and let the police and the FBI deal with Ellie. But of course, Stevie doesn't do that.
Also, too, Stevie feels responsible if something happens to her, because she's like, the only reason she ran away is because I didn't listen to Larry and I didn't listen to Nate, and I called her out in front of a bunch of other people, which prompted her to run away. They could not handle this quietly, basically, since she had to do the whole Velma scene at the end of the last book.
Mm-hmm.
She blames herself for what happened or what has not happened to Ellie. Yeah.
I'm trying to think about any other like really relevant plot information that happens.
We do another flashback. There's not a lot of relevant plot information left for the modern timeline until we get towards the end. We have a flashback to 1936 with Frankie, a girl who used to live in the Minerva house.
at the same time as Dottie.
Yes, which is the same time the Ellingham kidnapping and subsequent murder took place. She has a friend, Edward, and that those two are obsessed with Bonnie and Clyde. The tin of clues that Stevie has used to belong to Frankie and her friend Edward. It is also revealed throughout the course of this flashback that Frankie is freaking out because she tells Edward about what's going on with the Ellinghams, and she thinks that they believe their note has something to do with it. So Frankie and Edward, it is revealed, are truly devious. But they thought they were just sending a fun little note. They didn't realize it was going to be.
Frankie has got these. She is the daughter of a very rich man. He owns a flour company and a series of factories. So his flour is in like grocery stores all over. And so flour, fun fact for those of you who don't know, is highly flammable.
Yes.
And flour factories, especially back in the 1930s, pretty frequently had explosions because if you put it under too much pressure and heat, flour can essentially become the main ingredient in an explosive. And so Frankie, at a fairly young age, sees the result of one of these flour explosions at one of her father's factories, and she becomes a firebug. She kind of is obsessed with the idea of fires and of explosions, which begins to become an obsession with criminals and the glamour of a criminal like Bonnie and Clyde. And so she pulls her boyfriend Edward into this with her because he's also kind of a rough around the edges kid who's always getting in trouble.
And flour, since this is in 1936, we're in the midst of the Great Depression. Flour is something that everybody still needs to survive. So Frankie's father never really lost that fortune, which is another reason why Bonnie and Clyde became such a sensational story. It's because it distracted a lot of people from their everyday woes. It was the first kind of like People news magazine kind of story we had.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And anyway, Frankie is the one who decides. She kind of finds Albert Ellingham to be pretentious and stuck up, and she wants to make him feel something other than confidence. And so she thinks, oh, wouldn't it be fun to play some sort of prank? Like he says that learning is a game, so let me play a prank on him and send him a ransom note. She talks even to the FBI agent Marsh about this, like asks him, have people really sent notes with like cut out letters and stuff? And then she gets Edward to write the poem. He is a literature student there at the school. And they send it off thinking it's going to be some innocuous fun. But because it happened in such close proximity to the kidnappings and murders, the two become tied together. So even though Edward and Frankie are truly devious, they are not connected to the kidnapping and murder of Iris and Dottie and Alice.
But there are multiple messages from Truly Devious. So if they wrote the first one, who wrote the rest? So for us as readers, that's another clue to us that it's like, oh, there's more than one Truly Devious. That idea comes back because of the message that was on Stevie's wall in the first book. If the first Truly Devious was around to perform these kidnappings in the 1930s, we're looking at the late 2010s, maybe early 2020s for the setting of this book.
Almost 90 years later. Yeah.
Yes. The original Truly Devious would be long gone.
Yeah. So whatever has happened, and this book does not really get into the letter that is on Stevie's wall, which I'm interested in. It doesn't really get into it or talk about it much. The only one that's focused on here are the first Truly Devious letter and Albert Ellingham's final riddle.
Yes, so, and the tape recording. When Stevie is cleaning out the attic and going through the Ellingham's effects, she finds an old tape player, and so she asks Janelle to build something to be able to play the tape that this is on. because she finds a notation in a book from Albert Ellingham that says it's on the wire. So she found the wire. She just doesn't have a way to listen to it. And she does, when she finally does get to listen to it, she realizes it is Albert Ellingham's interview with Dottie.
Yes, because he interviewed all his students when they first came to school. And so to get a good perspective of them, Dottie, it turns out, was the first student he selected to come to his school. And that we also get some more interesting character development of Albert Ellingham, that he actually grew up an orphan and a newsie, very poor himself, which does give a little more depth to his character, because I commented on the last one that it's hard to see a very, very wealthy man be like, I'm creating this school, it's completely free, everybody can come, no strings attached. And my skepticism at that from someone so wealthy is a little bit dimmed now, understanding that he grew up in that much poorer situation himself.
Yes, and in that interview with Dottie, she talks about the second story and attic men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are several terms that Dottie kind of introduces here. Second story and attic man. So this is talking about in crime, the unseen partner of a criminal, and then the attic men are the people hunting the criminals, the police. And this doesn't seem like it's immediately relevant, but Stevie notices, much like Albert Ellingham had noticed, that Dottie had underlined a single line in the Sherlock Holmes that she was reading at the time she was murdered, and realizes that this is a very crucial clue, that Dottie was trying to help them solve the crime, because we know Dottie recognized her killer. The line is from A Study in Scarlet. I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic, is the line that she has underlined. So after her conversation with Ellingham about attic men, she knew that underlining this line would alert him to the identity of her killer.
Yes.
Stevie has not yet made that connection, but in the flashbacks, Albert Ellingham does. And he plans out accordingly to go out on his boat. And as you'll remember, he died on his boat because it exploded. And they thought that it was terrorists, someone like Anton Voracek, someone from the anarchist group, because he is threatened by lots of people.
Yes. And this is the afternoon after he wrote his final riddle. Mm-hmm. Where do you look for someone who's never truly there? Always on a staircase, never on a stair. And his secretary thought it very odd that Mr. Ellingham didn't tell him the answer, because he always did.
And so Ellingham went out on his boat, and he was accompanied by his friend from the FBI, John Marsh. And while they're out on the boat, we now find out what happened. We get that scene of the two of them on the boat. Ellingham confronts Marsh because he realized Marsh, being an FBI agent, makes him the attic man. And that is why she underlined the line about attics in A Study in Scarlet.
Yes, and the riddles, the answer to the riddle would also lead whoever solved it to the kidnapper and killer. Always on a staircase, never on a stair. You take the stair away, always on a case. Who's always on a case and never really there? John Marsh.
So John Marsh is the one who masterminded the kidnapping of Iris and Alice Ellingham. But according to him, everything went wrong. First, whenever he found Dottie in the reading room, whenever he was going there to meet with Ellingham, she fell down the ladder, cracked her head, and was bleeding everywhere. So he killed her, partially to put her out of her misery, and partly because she recognized him and she could identify him. He confesses this to Ellingham. Ellingham wants to know where his wife and daughter are. And he explains, I didn't do the actual kidnapping. I hired some men to do that. But because Alice was with Iris, she was a lot more aggressive in trying to protect herself because she was trying to protect her child.
Yes.
And presumably she was killed during that altercation.
Yes. And he doesn't know where Alice is. And through the course of this conversation, Marsh basically tells him, do it. Set off this bomb. I don't know where Alice is. She's probably dead. And
Marsh, sorry, we didn't tell you this, but Ellingham loaded the boat up with explosives, with dynamite, before taking it out. So the boat was blown up by Albert Ellingham.
Yes, and he was going to do it as leverage to try to get the whereabouts of his child from Marsh.
But Marsh tells him he's been looking for Alice. He has been legitimately investigating, which was the biggest thing that made it hard to realize it was Marsh at first. Is like, why would someone investigate a case that they perpetrated? You don't want to get caught. But it went sideways on him because of the people he involved. And so he has been legitimately investigating to try and find Alice, and he's come up with nothing. And that's not what Ellingham wants to hear. No. And Ellingham's like, I have nothing to lose. I'm willing to die here today. And Marsh is like, well, I have nothing to lose either. Now that you've discovered this, and I know that I can't find Alice for you, what else is there for either of us? And so Ellingham detonates the dynamite and kills both of them.
Well, they don't know if it's Marsh's cigarette that lights it on fire and there's a subsequent explosion, or they don't know if Albert just lets it go.
Did it say something like that in the book? I must have missed it.
There was such a focus on Marsh smoking close to, explosives.
Yeah, but I thought Ellingham told him to stop smoking because it didn't mix well with boats before he even realized there was dynamite.
I kind of read it as he was worried about the cigarette letting the explosive go off.
Right. Yeah, either way, the boat explodes. They both do die, because that was another thing. I was like wondering if they had actually died, like if that had been faked or staged. But Marsh, as far as we know, Marsh and Ellingham go up in flames. Marsh was the mastermind behind this kidnapping, but he only killed Dottie. He didn't kill Iris, so we don't know who killed Iris, and we don't know what happened to Alice at all. But we do know one other thing about Alice, they don't say it explicitly, but at the beginning of the book, the first flashback in the book, the house mistress of Minerva House meets with Albert Ellingham. Frankie follows. Frankie is the character that we are in the perspective of at that time, and she sees the two of them are having an affair. So he's sending her to the city, to an apartment that they have set aside, and she's going to go there and be safe. But what this kind of implicates for Alice, John Marsh, before he dies, Marsh says, I also know Alice's secret. I know your secret about Alice, which to me kind of reads as maybe Alice is not Iris's daughter.
Perhaps not. But there is another thing that we need to remember about Alice, is that the reward for Alice's safe return is still valid. It's set aside in his estate. And also Alice's inheritance is still set aside. They made a big point about it in the first book when they did the welcome day that said all of them were there on Alice's dime. So Alice is still missing. And, she was 3 years old. 3 years old.
It would be 89 in 2018 is, I think, what the math would work out to.
Yes. So she could still very possibly be alive somewhere. And the way that Maureen Johnson wrote the reveal scene for the whodunit, It was done so beautifully at the end of this book. I know we're going to get to like the things we loved about this book. That scene where we find out that Marsh is the guy, when Stevie figures it out, that scene was just so beautifully written. I loved it. That's probably my favorite scene I've ever read in a book. It was so good.
Well, I will let you take that when we get to that. But we have to first jump back to the present, to 2019 or wherever we are. And Halloween rolls around.
Yes.
Janelle is like, I have been sad. People have died. People have disappeared. I want to have a fun Halloween with my friends. We're wearing costumes. We're going to this Halloween party. So they go to the Halloween party together. And much like the last time that they were all at a party together, Stevie has a realization. And she and Nate and David go back to Minerva House because Stevie has realized that there is very possibly a secret passage underneath.
Yes.
And as soon as they introduced the possibility of a secret passage underneath Minerva House, I knew what was going to happen next.
Yeah. It's literally under the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Because this whole school is a haunted mansion style amusement park. She and David go down into the tunnels. And then they have a little makeout session, which is ruined by the discovery of Ellie's body.
But the most interesting thing about this scene is that it goes on for 3 goddamn chapters. Mm-hmm. They're walking through these tunnels for 3 goddamn chapters, having conversations about his dad, about their relationship with each other, about Ellie, about Truly Devious, all of these different conversations that they're having and going on. And the whole time you as the reader have already kind of figured out that they're about to find Ellie's body. And so you're sitting here at like, I mean, in the first chapter, they mentioned that the tunnel smells awful. Mm-hmm. And so the reader is sitting here just in this state of dread, just waiting for them to discover the body. And eventually they do find Ellie's body down one of the branch pathways. She has died of thirst or starvation, hypothermia. She's basically, I mean, she's been down there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they leave the tunnel, they go back up, and David says, go to your rooms, turn on your music on your headphones as loud as you can. I'm the local troublemaker. I will tell them that I found this exploring by myself. Stevie, you cannot be the person who was down in these tunnels. You'll get in so much trouble. You can't do it. And so he reports the body, and then the whole kerfuffle kicks up again. And in the aftermath here, first off, Stevie confesses to Larry that she was there. He's not surprised. First off, he found her mustache from her Hercule Poirot costume in the tunnel. And second off, Stevie's not a very good liar. No. And so Larry knows she was down there, but he agrees that ratting her out to the school would not benefit anybody at this point. So he tells her, as long as nothing else comes up, you don't have to say you were down there. He
also confesses that he is leaving Ellingham Academy as the security officer. Yeah, he's been let go.
Basically, 2 kids showing up dead in the space of one school year.
Yeah.
They don't feel like he's doing his job, which neither of those things was his fault, but
no. They have to blame somebody, and they're going to blame the lowest kid on the totem pole.
Yeah. So Larry is leaving the school, but he gives Stevie his phone number, says, call me if you need anything, anytime, night or day, give me a call. Larry has developed this very cool, I really like the relationship between Larry and Stevie. It's very paternal. He seems to like not look down on her like she's a child. Like he seems to be very confident in her abilities. And even though he gets mad at her and scolds her a lot, he really seems to genuinely like her. And she is very fond of him as well.
He sees a young cop in Stevie. He sees a very young, very promising detective in her, which is not something that she's used to because her parents see their little girl. They see a daughter. Like it even says in the book that Stevie hates Halloween because her parents would make her always wear a princess outfit, and she
Princess
hated
costume. Yeah.
it. And I'm like, I understand that she's your little girl and she's your daughter, but if she tells you she doesn't want that, maybe you should listen.
Yeah. Ellie's body being found obviously kicks the school into another frenzy here.
There's another major fallout between David and Stevie. Stevie admits
David figures it out. The thing is, Stevie never tells him, but David makes the connection after Ellie's body is discovered, and they're all like off on their own. David realizes that Stevie was brought back to school by his father, and that's just too much for him because he's trying so hard to stay away from his father and stay out of his father's orbit of influence, and Stevie is now part of that orbit of influence, and this girl that he's got these feelings for. So he does not take it well, and she does not respond well either. She flees, and they end up being on very tense terms with each other for the rest of the book.
And David runs away, essentially. Stevie even gets a text from David's father about, like, where is my son? And she's just like, I'm not his babysitter.
Much like in the last book, everything kind of comes together at the end. Stevie has figured out that Marsh is the killer. She has figured out some of the details here. She has figured out who Truly Devious is, who wrote the original Truly Devious letter. She tries to get in touch with Dr. Fenton to let her know this. And Fenton is not answering her phone.
No, and so she asks Larry to go by her house and check on her.
She said, I have a bad feeling. She calls Larry. She's like, I don't know what it is, but I have a very bad feeling. You have to go check on her.
And she does finally get through once to Dr. Fenton, and you hear she's still at the school. And that is the last thing we ever hear from Dr. Fenton, at least in book 2, because the book ends with Larry calling Stevie and telling Stevie that Dr. Fenton's house is aflame.
Dr. Fenton is dead.
Yes. We don't know what happened to our nephew Hunter at the moment.
There were 2 bodies in the house, and one was Dr. Fenton, and she was dead. The other body has not yet been identified.
No. But we suspect it's Hunter. Hunter is on a crutch, can't move super fast. But we don't know why the house is on fire, how it got to be on fire. But at least one person is dead. Maybe 2 people are dead. And Stevie has this knowledge of who committed the crimes and is dealing with the fact that Ellie is dead. It's a lot. And that's just the end of the book. That's just the abrupt end of the book.
I was listening to it in my car while driving, and I kind of stopped and looked over because she started reading the copyright information, and I was just like, okay, I fucking guess.
Have some sympathy for me because I read this book a year before Hand on the Wall was going to come out.
Stupid.
And then Hand on the Wall did come out, and then I subsequently had children.
Yeah. So we have had questions answered, but we have more questions that have been piled on top. So we know who Truly Devious is. We know who was responsible for the kidnapping of Iris and Alice. We still don't know where Alice is, probably. We don't know who started the fire and killed Dr. Fenton. We don't know why they did that. We don't know anything about what's going on with Ellie. We don't know how Ellie got a hold of the 10 with all the clues in it. We still don't know whether Ellie intentionally murdered Hayes or it was an accident. I'm starting to lean towards Ellie didn't do it at all, but she knew about it.
I'm leaning towards if Ellie did do it, it was a complete accident and she didn't mean to. But
I don't think she even did it.
I can very much see what you're doing, where you're coming from, where she didn't do it, but she knew about it, because that would still explain her behavior. She may not have done it, but she was at least complicit.
Yeah.
In it, and felt guilty about it, because also too, we overheard one of the members of the staff say that the school was going to come into a windfall of cash. If Alice is not found by her 90th birthday, I think then the her inheritance reverts to the school. And, you know, she would be, what'd you say, 83?
89.
89. So we're down to the wire, folks. With trying to find Alice. And one of the teachers said that it would be very, very soon. So it's one of those that it's like, who has the motivation to keep Alice hidden after all these years? I think that personally, the name of Frankie's compatriot, her boyfriend,
Edward,
and the first name of David's father are not a coincidence. The ages don't line up, but he could be a junior.
I don't think that he is related to it. I think Ellie is. Because Frankie, Stevie does a little digging on Frankie. And after she left school, she went to college, but then she dropped out. Then she moved to Paris and disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yes. And Ellie has said a lot about living in Paris. So Ellie's mother or grandmother could have been the original Truly Devious.
Which would explain why Ellie had the tin. But
it also...
Ellie's room is Frankie's room.
Yes.
Ellie is in the same room that Frankie was in when she was there. So the tin was originally hidden in a hole in the wall that Stevie and Nate discover. And we know that Frankie left that tin there when she left the school the night that Iris and Alice were kidnapped. So she never got to come back for the tin. So it very easily could be just that Ellie found it, having stayed in that room for 2 years.
Yes. Or it could be that Ellie never found it and Stevie just found it.
No, it was in Ellie's bed when she found it, in her blankets.
I thought it was under the wall.
No, that is where she found a mouse in the hollow in the wall.
Yes, thank you. I was getting my scenes mixed up.
Yeah, so Frankie had hidden the tin back in the 1930s in the hollow in the wall, and she wanted to go back to her room and get it, but her house mistress wouldn't let her because they were all leaving because Iris and Alice had been kidnapped, and she never came back to the school after that. So either Ellie found the tin and someone else who was trying to keep Alice a secret decided that Ellie having the tin made her dangerous, and so was involved in the whole Ellie Hayes kerfuffle. Or Ellie could potentially be related to Frankie. It's really hard to say at this point. I don't feel like we have enough information to answer these questions.
No, it could also be a situation where, you know, Ellie has the 10 and figured out that Truly Devious never really was the one who took Alice. And whoever knows Ellie has the 10 pinned Hayes' death on her.
Yeah. I definitely think that Hayes and Ellie's deaths are tied to the Truly Devious case. There is a connection. I'm not sure what it is yet, but there is a connection.
Especially since they both died in tunnels under the school.
Yeah.
But the fact that both seemingly knew about these impossible tunnels under the school that had been sealed up for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Where did they get that information?
Exactly.
Because even David, who is a self-proclaimed expert on everything about the secret passages and hidden places in Ellingham, insists before they find the tunnel underneath Minerva House, he insists that there's not one there, that he would have found it. But I'm not really sure. I know for sure that I feel like Hayes and Ellie's deaths, Dr. Fenton's death, all these modern deaths are definitely connected in some way.
Oh, yeah.
To the original Ellingham case.
And who is the new Truly Devious? Are they the one who are silencing all these people?
That projected the letter on Stevie's wall. And if they are, then why would they give Stevie the letter? Like, why would they give her something that could potentially be clues? There's a lot more questions than there are answers. And I can definitely see how it's going to take at least 2 more books to wrap it up.
Is the new Truly Devious Alice?
That wouldn't, I mean.
Well, Alice probably, if she wants to be found, would probably want this case solved and figured out for it to be safe for her to come back, and she's running out of time. It could also, so again, we could have another case of the person who's doing this is not the new Truly Devious, and the new Truly Devious is somebody who wants Stevie to figure this out.
The other thing to keep in mind, and like this doesn't necessarily have to be true in every murder mystery, but it is true in most of the good ones that you can figure out yourself before the end. Mm-hmm. We will have been introduced to our culprit at the very beginning.
Very first book. That is a rule of writing, is you introduce your villain on the first page.
Yeah. So whoever is behind all of this is someone we already know. I'm sure of that much. If it's unless she's gonna just be like a twist out of nowhere, which I can't foresee her doing.
No, Maureen's too good. Do you think I call you Maureen?
Just because she follows us on Twitter does not mean we're friends, Liz.
It sounds so strange calling her Miss Johnson, though.
But yeah, so that's the general gist of this book. Again, it's kind of hard to discuss because it is very much a bridge between the beginning of the mystery and like the solving of the mystery. So we're not getting a lot of plot. We're not getting a lot of information, but it was still a pretty quick and interesting read, in my opinion. Liz, what would you say were your favorite parts of it?
My least favorite parts are always David. I just don't like him. I just the scene where he had some guys beat him up and film it and upload it to YouTube. I'm like, wow, that is some petty rich white boy shit. You know? It's almost like he's purposely trying to get Stevie in trouble, or just he's trying so hard to piss off his dad. I'm like, maybe grow up and start using your damn brain. I do not like David.
I can tell.
Stevie deserves better. Maybe a cat. The cat would be more loyal. But my favorite part, my favorite part of this book is the scene where Stevie figures out who Truly Devious is and that Marsh is the one who did it. And just the way it is written is just so masterfully done. It's absolutely gorgeous. She literally, Maureen Johnson writes it as if the ghosts of the suspects are standing in front of Stevie.
She basically has a parlor room scene with them.
Yeah. We have our final lineup of our suspects, and we go through all the information. We go through the who had motive and who had opportunity and who really could do it. And it's just so beautifully done. And then she figures it out, and she's mentally staring at the face of the person who did this in this case that has not been solved by anybody in 80 years. And she's done it. She's figured it out. Her life's mission is complete. And then we seamlessly transition into the scene with Albert Ellingham and Marsh on the boat. And we, as the audience, get all of our answers for that case, or for that particular question.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautifully done. I hope one day to be that good. What was your favorite part, Case?
Well, first off, I'm going to throw a wrench in it here because I know you want me to be with you here on the David thing, but my opinion on David has changed since the first book.
Oh, really?
Yes. I still think he's making dumb decisions and maybe not behaving in an appropriate manner, but I don't dislike him. I feel like I understand his character and his motivations a lot more. His dad is incredibly manipulative. His dad literally kept his mom married to him for years and years just so he could bring her out for parties. And David and his mother never got any kind of actual attention or care from Edward King. They just got enough money to get by with. And then eventually he did divorce her after she cheated on him because he left her alone all the time. And then she's an alcoholic. So David is having to take care of his alcoholic mother alone. And his dad never offers any assistance. His dad just, basically treats him as a prop. I can understand David's anger and his acting out. And I can definitely understand why he wouldn't want anything to do with Stevie anymore. I feel like David's feelings for Stevie are very genuine. Whether or not they're a good fit is irrelevant. I do feel like he genuinely cares about her. And I feel like for him to find out that she is associated with his dad behind his back is pretty fucking devastating. Like this man that he's tried so hard to escape from, who has never been a good father to him. And the girl that he cares most about is like, associated with that guy. Like, should he have, caused all the trouble at the school? No. Should he have paid those guys to beat him up? No. But I wouldn't say that's rich white boy shit. I would say that is somebody who is severely mentally ill acting out as a plea for help. Like you don't ask somebody to beat the absolute shit out of you if you're well in the head, like whether David is particularly likable or not, definitely I feel like is up for interpretation, but I understand his motivations much better in this book than I did in the previous one. So I felt like he was more compelling as a character.
I never thought about it like that.
You have a nice dad.
Yes, I do have a nice dad.
I mean, like, I definitely can understand why the character would not be likable to certain people. And I still don't care for the like whole romance angle in general. Like I actually found it kind of frustrating in this book because in addition to David, we have Hunter, who's like clearly into Stevie and she's like not sure if he's into her, not sure if she's into him. And then there's Nate, who seems to be the person who understands Stevie the best on a purely like emotional and, mental level, but they're not a couple. But David makes clear that he is jealous of Nate on a couple of occasions. And it's just like, I'm so tired of every single book that has every single YA book that has a female protagonist has to not only have her have like a love interest, there's got to be a love triangle or like a bunch of men vying for attention because she thinks she's plain and boring, but actually she's really charming and interesting. Like that just trope is exhausting to me and I'm not interested in it. And I feel like she plays into it a little too heavily for my tastes here.
Yeah, I did not. I came to this book for the mystery. I was very annoyed by some of the romantic interactions, kind of a thing. And I do have sympathy for David, but I don't like him.
That's fair. Like again, everybody's got their own, but I was surprised because you had told me before we read this book, I think you had told me I liked David even less after reading The Vanishing Stair. So I was kind of expecting to have that same experience. But for me, I felt like he was into Stevie and like maybe that was one of the first like good things he'd had in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And while, whether or not they're a good fit or whatever is irrelevant, like to think of a person having a really shitty time and then getting one good thing in their life that they kind of treasure and then finding out that thing is tainted by the thing that has made the rest of their life shitty. Like it's not surprising he would act out or that he would be that way with her. Like they are 16 years old,
That was glorious.
Yeah. But I'd say my least favorite thing about this book was the insistence on focusing on like romantic side stories in the middle of the mystery when I just want to deal with the mystery. And then B, just the fact that it's a middle book, so it can't stand on its own. And so much of the beginning of the book is taken up by recapping the previous book. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really care for that. But my favorite thing about this book, I would have to say the pacing I still really enjoyed. Even though I complained about there being 3 chapters of them in the tunnel before they found Ellie, I felt like that was very effective, like as the reader, because my anxiety just kept building and I was just like, oh God, it's going to happen any minute now. And just like kind of on tenterhooks, which was cool. And then the other thing I really liked about this one was that we got to see more of Stevie doing the actual research.
Yeah.
Like a lot of her other detectiving was like looking around and skulking around and sneaking around in places she shouldn't be. This one, she like legitimately goes to the library, pores over old magazines and books and yearbooks and things. And like that's an interesting part of detective work that a lot of times does get left out of these stories for generally for time's sake. But I kind of enjoyed having it in there. It made it feel a little bit different from the first book in its pacing, so at least it had flexibility.
It's the montage in the movie, or the "so get this" phrase of Supernatural. It was nice that was really highlighted, and I just kind of want Stevie to just be like, I'm cool without any kind of boy or romance or whatever. I just want to solve this case and get a cat.
I get one per episode, so I'm gonna do it here. Okay. I don't understand why Maureen Johnson created Vi to be Janelle's love interest, because the way that Stevie describes Janelle every time she shows up anywhere, Janelle is so beautiful and she smells so good and she's the smartest person I know, and I'm like, girl, you have a big ass crush on Janelle. Like, I mean, I don't know if she wrote it with that as the intention, but while I can't appreciate just like a really tight friendship where you really admire the other person, obviously, you know, I think that it definitely can come across as like crush behavior. And I'm like, why didn't you just make Janelle and see? But I guess that relationship would be too stable and wouldn't give us the tumultuous highs and lows of her relationship with David, because Janelle would just be like, I'm here and I support you and I love you. And so there wouldn't be any drama.
Do you think Stevie would know how to handle that?
Being loved and supported?
Yeah, because people who've genuinely not been loved and supported, when they finally get it, they're like, what is this witchcraft?
Well, and that's where you can make the argument, you know, Janelle is just a very close friend, because Janelle, you know, respects her, is enthusiastic about, even if she doesn't understand, is enthusiastic about the things that Stevie finds herself passionate about. She understands Stevie's like anxiety and helps her through panic attacks. Like, so yeah, I can understand like just being a very valued friend, but it's like literally every time Janelle is in the book, like in the scene for more than like 3 seconds, Stevie goes on a whole thing about, oh, she looks so pretty today. She's got all of her accessories together. She smells good. And did you know she's also a very talented engineer? And it's just like, damn, Stevie, damn. But Vi got a little bit more screen time in this one. Not a lot, but a little bit more. And the pronouns were consistent. So I appreciated that improvement. But yeah, you know, I think this book was fun, but it was very much, it was only fun and good because the first one was.
Yeah.
Like if the first book had not been interesting, it wouldn't have been able to be redeemed with this book, because this book is so dependent on it.
This was, I know we read The Beautiful earlier and The Damned came out, and it was supposed to be like a 3-part series or whatever. If Truly Devious had been as bad as The Beautiful, we would not be reading this book.
No, absolutely not. All. I would rather die.
Because Truly Devious was the first book. I know one of our biggest things with The Beautiful was we didn't get any answers to anything, and the questions we did have, the answers we were given were unsuitable. In Truly Devious, we didn't really get a whole lot of answers. We got one answer, but more questions.
Yeah.
But the answer was suitable, and we were able to get invested in a story much bigger than what Stevie had originally thought. And
we're looking forward to reading Hand on the Wall. Which is a pretty good indicator that the book did its job.
Yeah, I'm so excited to read it. I have Allie's copy. Sorry, Allie, that I've had it so long. But Allie over at Story Eyed Reviews, after the next episode, don't go before, did a wonderful blog entry for Hand on the Wall because she got to preview it, and I was very mad at her.
And that'll be a fun one to read. But in the meantime, this one we enjoyed. But how many bottles would you say you give it? You gave the last one 3.75.
I give this one 3.25. Because the first time I originally read it, I was still working at the winery, so I had my audiobook going when we were slow, when I was restocking. And I remember I had figured it out and Stevie was figuring out. And I remember just like fist pumping the air because I'm like, yes, I was right.
Yeah, I was pleased with at least getting that satisfaction. And like I had figured it out too. I mean, I think I told you in the last episode that my original suspect was Leonard Nair.
Yes.
He was there and unobtrusive. Basically all the same reasons it did end up being Marsh were the reasons that I first zoomed in on Nair. And before the reveal for Marsh, I did figure it out myself, which was satisfying. It's always satisfying to get it before the characters do. But I say I would probably give this one 3 bottles.
Mm-hmm.
I gave the last one 3.5, but like I said, this one is very much dependent upon the first one. I'm hoping that's not the case with Hand on the Wall. I'm hoping it has a little bit more variety to it, but since we know there's one more after, I'm expecting it to be pretty similar to this in style and function.
Yeah. It seems like with the pace she's going, I've read the summary for the next one. The next one is very much a there's nowhere to go kind of mystery because it says that there's a major snowstorm coming in at Ellingham, so they're all going to be trapped there.
Trapped by the blizzard. I love it.
Yes, it's gonna be we're all trapped in here with a murderer.
Well, and that's also interesting because the other problem I have with this is the same problem you have with any like teen detective shit, right? Where it's like they're like the first time the teen detective does something against the rules to find something out, they get scolded. It's like, don't do this again or you'll be in very much trouble. And then they just keep doing it and never facing consequences. Like Stevie had to go home and then she got back, but she had to lie in order to stay back. Like she couldn't tell them she found Ellie. Yeah. And then it's like having the blizzard as the reason they can't leave it's a different reason instead of them just being like, oh, we forgive you for all of that silly stuff again. Like, so I appreciate that she's trying to, you know, kind of trying to lampshade that whole concept of like teen detective gets in trouble over and over again, but there are never any real consequences.
And we know Maureen Johnson is actually finishing this quartet of books. I am still waiting for the 4th Shades of London book.
Oh my God, right?
Oh, please, Maureen Johnson, finish Shades of London before I do it for you. And then Stephen and Rory get a puppy.
All right. So, as we said, we are going to be reading Hand on the Wall for our next book. That will be the book that comes out that'll be the episode that comes out on May 15th. And then June 15th, we will be reading Tori Peters' Detransition Baby. As always, if you want to get in touch with us, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast, and you can check out our website, litliteraturePodcast.com.
Yes, and if you're feeling exceptionally generous, we do have a Patreon. Case is married and owns a house and a plethora of animals. I am raising 2 small human beings. So anything you guys can give, we are eternally grateful for. We also understand that times are tight and terrible, and we're still in a pandemic, hopefully on the tail end of it. So if you don't have anything to give, that's perfectly fine. We still love you. If you could just tell someone to give us a listen or give us a watch, we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you for the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. For more information, visit us at litliteraturePodcast.com or check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And remember, too much work and no vacation deserves at least a small libation. Cheers!